Making art means revealing a part of ourselves, and quite frankly, that is terrifying. Welcome to this week's video. Today, I want to talk about the fear of perception and how that can sort of manifest in a bit of a creative block. Hi. For anyone who doesn't know me, I'm Jay. I've been a professional commercial illustrator for the past 6 years. My work has sold thousands of times globally. I've illustrated books, products, stationery, prints, textiles, ceramics, metal items. And basically one of the biggest problems I have come across in my 6 years of being an illustrator is this all-encompassing, consistent, like low-level creative block. And so I want to talk about it. At its core, creatives are human beings, obviously. And so we have regular human fears, the fear of being judged, the fear of being made fun of, the fear of like not fitting in, or of being seen as like too much or too cringy or too annoying or like too sentimental, too emotional, like literally whatever, like too anything. And as a creative, that becomes really problematic because good work comes from the parts of us that are uniquely us. And so I think that a lot of the time when I have felt creatively blocked in my career, it is because there is a part of myself that I'm either unwilling to accept, unwilling to have seen, or like unwilling to share with others. At its core, being seen means being judged, and that is really hurtful. And if you are anything like me at all, you're a little bit of a sensitive soul. It can almost feel safer to not make anything whatsoever, or to try and make something that is so curated to what you think people are expecting or what you think people will judge nicely, that the act of creation itself becomes so unrewarding because you're not creating in a way that feels like aligned to you. Now, I wish I had good news and I could say that, you know what, after a career in illustration, that feeling goes away, but I'm 6 years in and that feeling is still there constantly. If you've watched any of my other videos, particularly my 1.9 million Instagram views in a month video, you'll know I've spoken before about feeling like I'm too much or I'm not like quite the right fit in certain social situations. And I think that that feeling, or that inner critic, like that inner voice, that sense of being too much or too annoying, or just too intense for most people, really has caused so much havoc in my creative life. And it was only, I think, in the last year that I really became aware of it and they started taking steps to change it. And in that year of taking steps to change it, I have felt the most creatively fulfilled that I ever have. And so I want to share with you how I did that, what I identified as being a bit of a problem, and how hopefully you can overcome your own sense of creative block as well. Let's get into it. Okay, so we are taking a little bit of a trip back and we're going to do some deep dive analysis into our creative journeys, our sense of self. And you know, this might potentially be a bit of like an uncomfortable activity or an uncomfortable journey, but I really want us to sit for a second and think about the critics and the experiences that we've had growing up that have caused us to really censor ourselves or doubt our own abilities. We are shaped by so much. Institutions, algorithms, social circles, the country we were born into, the friends that we have, our families, and without even meaning to, we develop a set of internal rules about who we should and shouldn't be based on other people's expectations. For me, that has very often manifested in being cautious of being too much. And I can like distinctly recall certain situations where I've like literally been told that I'm being too much, and even if it happened years ago, it still stings. And I think that for me has carried through into my work. I've never wanted to be perceived as too much, and it meant that for a very long time I was either living in this middle ground of trying to not be too much of any one quality, not trying to be too feminine, not trying to be too masculine, not trying to be too whimsical, not trying to be too design oriented, not trying to be too, at some points, I would even critique my own work for being too positive, because I was like, oh, is it going to be perceived as like toxic positivity? But then I also was like, I can't be too negative either. Like the internal censorship that I had on my own work and my own creative direction became quite literally crazy. Like, it was so much. So ultimately this starts to warp our sense of taste and warp our sense of creative confidence almost. And then we also have the added pressure of the algorithm. We chase trends, we chase engagement. If you've watched that 1.9 million view video, it is here, you would know I explicitly talk about creating work with the intention of performing for the algorithm. I don't even see that as a bad thing, and I fully stand by everything I said in that. Like, that is a very intentional tactic to grow an audience. But it can't be the only work that you create. If that is all you are doing, you're always performing, I think you lose such a sense of connection with self that you find sooner or later you end up in a state of creative block. And so this is what happened to me. I think it was about 6 months after I started full-time freelancing, after I got my first paid job after I like left my corporate role. Within 6 months, my freelance career had like blown up. And when I say blown up, like I mean genuinely, I was so booked out. I had so many concurrent jobs on the go. I was saying yes to everything. I was like making serious cash, which was amazing, but I was also working. I'm not even joking, like I know people exaggerate and stuff, but like I was working like 14, 15 hour days for probably 4 or 5 months straight. It was a really long like period of work. It was really intense. I ended up injuring my my drawing hand to the point where I had to take a bit of a break after it. And not only that, despite being the most booked out, the most like successful and the most recognized I had been to that like point in time, I was like almost ready to give up illustration, which was so sad because I was only like a year into it. Success came with its own like double-edged sword of pressure and like overwork, and because all I was doing was client work, a very, very strong degree of self-censorship. I was creating work based on briefs. I was creating work that was commercial, so it had to be inoffensive. It had to toe like the line of commercially viable and practical, and also meet my clients' needs, but still somehow be fulfilling to me. And that's a lot to juggle as a creative. So I want to ask you a question now. What if you're scared of making art for you because you're scared of what it might actually look like? What if your actual sense of taste is childish? What if your actual sense of taste is fantastical or juvenile or unrefined? What if what you like is not considered good by other people? I think what often happens as artists when we are trying to chase a version of success, whether that's monetary or audience-based or whatever we have determined for ourselves as being like the necessary requirement, especially if you're trying to like live off of your creativity, you start being scared of certain parts of yourself, or you start being wary of certain things that you might like. You start self-censoring. For me, I never wanted my work to be perceived as childish because I wanted to be a serious artist. I wanted to be a serious illustrator. Ironically enough, my work I'm pretty sure was still perceived as childish even when I was trying to be more serious. But I ended up in this pursuit of not being perceived as juvenile. I took on the voice of my clients, and for a designer or a commercial project, that's not a bad thing to do, but because that's all I was doing, that's what my voice became. Now, if you've seen any of my work, I will share some of my earlier work from that time period here, like this and this and this. It all lent very spirituality heavy. It all lent very esoteric, kind of like witchy. These were the clients I was working for, and I love drawing things like moons and stars and flowers. I like drawing vases and eyes and hands in witchy positions. I like that sort of stuff. I like it from a very aesthetic point of view, and I fully believe in like mindfulness and, you know, curating your sense of spirituality, but I lent so far into my client's voice that I lost connection with my sense of self, and I lost, it became like too spiritual for me. Is that even a thing? But it is a thing. It became too spiritual for me. The reality is I like stars and I like moons and I like all of these pretty things, and I like them in the context of storybooks like this. I like them in the context of fun packaging like this. And I like them in the context of pretty decorative, like cottagecore style items like this. And I became disconnected from that element of my personality or that element of my own sense of personal taste because I was so unwilling to face that my taste might be too cute. It might be too vintage, it might be like too much. It might not be serious, cutting edge design style. And I didn't want to accept that about myself. And so I refused to let that show in my art. Art is so deeply personal that it is inevitable that our own beliefs and values and personal qualities are going to show through. And so when you are self-censoring to that degree and you're unwilling to accept those parts of yourself, your art suffers for it. I started to notice that this self-censorship was affecting more than just my personal art style. So if you are looking at promoting your own art, if you're looking at like building an audience, then this part might also be quite relevant to you. I was listening to this TikTok the other day, and I can't remember the creator who it was by, but if I remember I will tag them here. But basically they were saying that people resonate with a level of expertise or a level of like lived experience. And if we think about that practically, it kind of makes sense. Now, this is not like a hard and fast rule, and I know already that there are plenty of examples of creators who have broken their mold and done the exact opposite of this. So like this isn't the only way to succeed on social media, it's just one way. But what's more interesting, essentially, listening to somebody say, I've built this business, this is how I did it, like I made $10,000 last month, whatever number, this is how, or listening to someone say, I'm on day 3 of building a business, I haven't made anything, I'm trying to work it out. Now, like I said, there is actually probably a subset, like an audience for both of those things. But I do think that the first one immediately offers a little bit more credibility. It's like they've done it, now they're going to show you how they did it. And if I look at the videos on my channel so far, and if I look at the content that I've made, I generally see that this to be true as well. The videos where I say, here is a thing that I have done, this is how I did it, or like this is what I learned from it, tend to be more well received than me just like randomly doing something. When it came to strategizing and trying to take this idea on board and create with this in mind, I found it really interesting because the process of doing this was really difficult for me. I sat down and I was like, okay, I want to talk about something that I know I know how to talk about, and immediately my mind went completely blank. I was like, oh, I've got literally nothing to discuss, which is wild because it's just not true. Now, this is like, see, I'm even doing it now. I'm getting like genuinely uncomfortable. This is not me being arrogant. I'm just going to give you a really quick rapid fire list of my credentials because like this proves how uncomfortable I get even talking about this. This just proves my point. So I've been a commercial illustrator for 6 years. My work has been seen by millions of people. My work has been sold on thousands of products. I've illustrated 13 books at last count. I built my Instagram audience from scratch, like it is a genuine, authentic audience. I full-time freelanced for multiple years, making more money than I've made at any corporate job ever. I became an academic lecturer, which is like not an easy job to get. Like it's just not, that's not me. Like I don't even mean to like toot my own horn. It's just not an easy job to get. I was accepted into like a very good art school, one of like the best art schools in the country that I'm in, for art, with no like art degree. I have a degree in design. So yeah, like I've done some stuff, and it's stuff that I think is really cool, but the second that I went to start brainstorming like a list of things I could discuss with people, or a list of things that I might have some kind of expertise on, my mind went blank, which is just not true. And I think the thing that clued me onto this idea of like this self-censorship and not wanting to be like, this is what made it click for me, that it was like me being too afraid of being perceived as like too much, because I have no problems going into my classes standing up in front of a classroom of students and giving them advice and chatting about my experiences with social media, my experiences with freelance, my experiences with selling art and design, that's not a problem. But as soon as it comes to the internet and sharing things online, I'm like, I know nothing, I am no one, I've done nothing. Who are you to listen to me? But like, that's not true. And so I've realized that this is not, it's not even a self-confidence issue. It is a self-censorship issue. And the only way you get to the bottom of that is by doing some really deep analysis about the parts of yourself you're not willing to accept just yet. So I've made a really conscious effort to make a personal shift in the last, I would say, year, to embrace who I actually am. And for once in my life, for the first time in my life, to actually accept who I am. And that means being a little bit more authentic online and actually sharing my genuine thoughts, even when it makes me uncomfortable and even when I am genuinely scared of being perceived. It means opening myself up to judgment, because I think that it's important to caveat this whole like, be authentic online. Like, there are no guarantees that you'll be authentic online and that it will actually resonate well with people. I think the internet is one of like the most cruel places to exist. And some people just want to argue for the sake of arguing. You know, some people are just unhappy. People project and people can be anonymous and it can be really, really brutal. So there is no guarantee that you open yourself up and you be genuine and that everybody absolutely resonates well and loves you for it. Like, that's unrealistic. But you don't get to the good stuff without risking a little bit here and there. So it is a necessary part of the process. And so I've made a really conscious effort to become far more me in my work. My work has started skewing far more feminine, way more cottagecore, more fairy tale inspired. And if you look at a direct like side-by-side comparison of a few pieces of my work, you will see that it is moving away from this deeply spiritual, esoteric sort of realm and to more of like a cutesy, cheeky, fun sort of place. And this actually feels far more like me. I never thought I'd be the kind of person to be making like frog stickers, but I am, and it's fun and I love it. And it was only when I accepted that I love that I actually started to feel a sense of joy for my art again, and that my like long-standing creative block, like low-level creative block, started to dissipate. So fundamentally, I've started to embrace this idea of letting people perceive me, but not letting them define me. Perception is essential to creative fulfillment, unfortunately. Like, unless you want to just create for yourself, in which case, like, go create for yourself. But I've discussed this in other videos. I find a sense of enjoyment and meaning and fulfillment from having my work connect with others. And this is another example of that, actually. It's generally, like, I see in art communities all the time, it's kind of frowned upon to be like, yes, I actually want to grow a community, and yes, I want people to see and like my work, and I want this to matter to people. To admit that out loud almost feels like desperate in some circles, and I think that is so wild to say that, like, yes, I want to connect with others. Wow, crazy, like, sue me. So I think even admitting that was a sense of me trying to really connect with like who I am and like what is actually true. There's no point, I'm not going to pretend I'm nonchalant, because I'm not. I'm very chalant. I'm like excessively chalant. So I may as well just admit that and be upfront about that. It really matters to me that my work matters to somebody. So perception is vital in those instances, but you don't have to let your audience define you. You just have to let them see and let them actually know you. And then the people that do like that will be the ones that matter to you. Fundamentally, sharing your work is risky, and especially like when you start creating with yourself, like your inner child or your actual values in mind, it becomes really, really scary to put your work out into the world. But the sense of reward from that also like triples. So that might mean making fan art when you haven't made fan art because you don't want to be perceived as childish. It might mean making really emotional art when you might be worried that people will think that you're looking for attention. But the reality is, like, you are looking to connect through this emotion, be it grief or sadness or anger, or like whatever. So that work will be so much more valuable, relatable, and meaningful, even though it opens you up for more criticism, than safe, bland, nothing-ish work. I think when we start thinking of our creative selves as almost like a person or like an entity separate to us, so it's like you are you and your creative self is like your best friend. It's like you would do anything to support and back and like honor their work and their journey and help them find connection with others. So giving yourself the same grace and the same kindness and the same sense of love that you would give to like a best friend becomes really, really important. And I genuinely think that there is a correlation between how much you accept yourself and how fulfilling you find your creative practice. The other thing I think that becomes really challenging and causes us to self-censor is the idea that sharing your work is quite like a public forum, and what if you change your mind over time? Like, what if you change your opinions or perspectives? What if you believe one thing one year and then the next year you realize that actually you don't believe that at all? And I think that it's important to remember that as humans we grow and adapt and change over time, and so a genuine documentation of that journey becomes a lot more rewarding than pretending that you are the most enlightened, completely perfect kind of artist. But I found that the other thing that has made leaning into my authentic self as a creative possible has been having a soft landing space, IRL. You don't need a lot of people around you, but you need a couple of people whose opinions you really trust and who you know genuinely have like your best interest at heart. And when you might be doubting what you're making, you go to them because they're going to be the ones who are acting from a place of love. You don't go to like your internet audience or your Instagram or whatever. Because your work becomes so personal to you, you seek opinions from places that matter, you know, that from places that are going to be treating that request with a level of like care and kindness and consideration. So having a soft place to land and come back to, and you know, when you might get criticized for something that you make, having like people or places or like rituals that ground you and keep you feeling like safe and secure, and remind you of like your worth as a human, that becomes really important. So for me, my new like measurement for how good my work is to me, in my own opinion, has become this sort of prompt, I suppose. If your art is feeling more like you, even if that's less trendy, then that is a sign of positive growth. There will be people, I would almost bet money on it. There will be people that no matter what the true you is, there will be people that resonate with that person. You just have to be brave enough to let them see it and let them find you. So for me, it has been being more connected to childhood joy. As you can see here with my painting that I'm working on, this was like the little version that I made. It's this like fairy garden type of thing. And I've been having so much fun painting these. They are so like, I already know if I take this to art school next semester and put this up, it's not going to be received well because it's not deep and meaningful. It is a pretty fairy garden. And you know what? For me, that is enough. And I love it. And it's fun and it's cute, okay? But for them, it's not going to be conceptual enough. It's not going to be deep and meaningful enough. I already know. But you know what? That's okay. They are not my only mirror. And I think starting to separate out the purpose of your art. Is it client work? Is it school work? Is it like personal work that is meant to spark joy? That becomes really important again in like understanding yourself, understanding who you are and like what you want to create, and then making sure that your art practice is creatively fulfilling for you. So I think that this process of achieving a sense of like creative freedom and overcoming this sort of creative block that comes with like repressing parts of your personality only happens through introspection and through journaling and through actually asking the question, what parts of me am I not necessarily willing to accept yet, and then genuinely answering honestly and openly. It takes time and it takes repeated practice, and it takes a genuine sense of like interest in yourself, the way you get to know somebody, like when you're on a date, asking those questions to yourself, like, oh, like, what do you do for fun? Like, what do you like? Like, what movies do you like? And then answering honestly without any sense of like, I'm trying to impress this person, or I'm trying to like look cool, or I'm trying to like look cultured. Take all of that away and actually just answer. I like Studio Ghibli movies, and I like fantasy films, and I like the Barbie movies, because I do, because they're cute. Starting to get to know yourself as though you are somebody else becomes really, really important. And then respecting what you actually say you like. I like girly pretty stuff, and so I'm painting a field full of pink flowers, and that makes me so joyful. And that doesn't mean that this is going to be suitable for art school. It doesn't mean that it's going to be suitable for a piece of client work, but it does mean that I get to feel connected to who I actually am, and I don't have to draw something for this 50th time that I'm just drawing to like make money, and I'm not, you know, drawing to like feel a sense of fulfillment, if that makes sense. So today's journaling prompt for you, if you are a journaler, or something for you to just like ponder if you're not. What would you make if you weren't afraid of people seeing who you really are? That's it for me this week, my friends. Thank you for spending some time yapping with me. I'm gonna get back to my painting. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.